Welcome to Mystara, as this week you get to hear me convert Rime the Frostmaiden into a Mystara adventure. I'm not a fan of this adventure. It feels padded, takes forever to get anywhere with the plot, and there's a ton of stuff tacked on that just seems to be there to add page count. It's another adventure that goes from level 1 to about level 10, same as quite a few of the other 5e modules. In short, nothing stands out to me. But how do we fix it? Well, I've got 320 pages to figure that out, though the main plot doesn't start until page 170, leaving me 150 pages to try. Oh, and the adventure is over on page 262, leaving me 92 pages to figure this out. I'm Mr. Welch, and it's time to thaw out Rime the Frostmaiden. I might as well get this out of the way first, as I have rewritten this entire video maybe 3 times now going through this book. Forget this module's overarching plot. Run it as a complete sandbox like it was Isle of Dread. Ignore the angry ice goddess. Ignore the dwarven plot. Take the several dozen subplots and let the players run around solving the ones they want to, and just let them explore the frozen north. Ignore the perpetual winter arc. It's just regular winter in a region where it's dark 24 hours a day for months on end. They have shown up in the far north looking for adventure and riches, and now it's winter. Nothing supernatural about the dark, just regular Arctic winter darkness. It's not like the winter goddess plot is the end of the book. It still keeps going for 2 chapters after that. This book's layout is a complete mess, and when a Mystara player tells you that the story's flow is all over the place, you know you've got a problem. This was easily one of the worst 5e modules for me. The balance of the encounters and the flow of the adventure seems almost random. It does have some good encounters and some minor adventures. You can take out the entire plot and just run this as mini adventures and you won't miss a thing. You'll probably actually have more fun. If the rest of the review seems a bit out of place, I moved this part up to the front because it's been bugging me all day. First up, as always, we obviously have to change the setting, and the obvious location for this module is Norwold. It's frosty, isolated, and cut off from the rest of the known world. Since the province is still being settled, you can hand-wave all of the small settlements as new towns just being established in the far north. In the Rime, the villain is the cruel and vindictive Oral, the ice goddess, and that isn't going to work in Mystara, naturally. Mystara doesn't have an immortal devoted to cold, because that's kind of an idiotic thing to become a patron of anyways. Who decides, when lined up for picking your domains as a god, that they want to have temperatures below 40 degrees Fahrenheit? That is a wasted decision. So who do we pick? Of the immortals that have cold as their domain, we have 3 of them. The Elamaster of Water is true neutral and doesn't bother with the prime material plane. Stotos is a minor immortal who looks like a toad and is trying to bring around the heat death of the multiverse. And finally there's Hell, the big bad of entropy. Unfortunately, none of these work for a variety of reasons. First off, immortals aren't allowed to use their powers to directly kill mortals. No wiping out another immortal's followers with a wish spell, much less a control weather spell. That's hardwired into the restrictions on immortal magic. Second, the other immortals are going to intervene if another immortal goes out and decides to freeze a portion of the planet. That's not something you can hide. Lastly, killing your own followers is a terrible idea that will get you a visit from any number of powerful immortals, even if you lead your sphere like Hell does. For the real villain, we're ordering off menu, stealing from Finnish folklore and getting us a more powerful fey creature, a Halileska or a Snow Queen. Yeah, I'm butchering that name badly, but close enough. You can find the stats for one over on the Vaults of Pandios, that you're going to have to ramp it up to Archfey status, which just means bigger powers and more hit points. The more powerful fey creatures can warp reality around them, and the Snow Queens, by and large, are very isolated creatures that experience loneliness more than any other. And while they are pining away, their powers make it very deadly to be near them. The sadder the Snow Queen is, the more powerful her aura of cold is. She might not even know she's freezing a huge chunk of the continent, or that other fey creatures are using the eternal winter to create absolute mayhem. As all the various names for the Fairy Tale Queen are about 20 letters long each, I'm just going to refer to her as Queenie. The basic premise is the same. Norwold is trapped in an eternal winter because Queenie has had her heart broken and her grief is so powerful that she's radiating cold for hundreds of miles. She's not doing this maliciously, but it's the curse of the Halileska that they don't understand their frost powers harm those around them. They don't feel the cold. And people who get close to them don't feel it either, though they're still freezing to death. They just don't feel the cold. The start of the adventure is the chapter that might as well be called the Hurry Up and Level Up to the Point that you can actually go on the actual adventure we wrote section. There are 10 micro-adventures, each linked to a specific town, with a couple of adventures that can be placed anywhere. The first is called Cold-Hearted Killer, that has a reputation of being overpowered because the bad guy has a ton of hit points, multiple attacks, regenerates, and deals 13 points of damage on average with an attack. Also, he teleports, and you face him at first level if your DM doesn't know what he's doing. And he's challenge rating 3. People have made videos saying he's not that bad. after running the combat 30 times so they can beat him no problems. Actually, that's a huge problem, because if you run the combat 3 dozen times, the players know what he's capable of. If the cast of Predator knew what the bad guy's power were, you can be sure they would have planned differently on how to tackle him. The repeat players are winning through meta-knowledge, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's practically unavoidable. After I realize a 12 misses the bad guy and a 13 hits him, I've got an idea what his AC is, and I'm going to figure out how many hit points in short order if I face enough of them. But if that's the only way the party is winning, that's the problem. The book says don't let this guy be the first adventure they face. Then it presents him as literally the first adventure they face. The guy can overkill wizards in a single hit because of the amount of damage he does on average, and he's got 2 attacks. The DM's options are play this guy dumb or have him jump on tanks, and even that's no guarantee, because if he hits both rolls, the fighter is going to go down. No fighter has 24 hit points at first level. The other option is to fudge like mad. I have no clue how this guy got past playtest. To make him Mystaran, change him from some undead guy standing up for his goddess to an unseelie she who likes to murder for sport. That's easy enough. The second and less TPK-filled starting quest involves a mage hiring the party to track down a bunch of Schwingas. No, not those. No, and definitely not those. The nature spirit Schwingas. Yeah, those. Granted, if the party wants to track down the first bunch, they're going to have to drive to Houston, and if they're tracking down the second bunch, they're not going to get paid, though it might be more fun for them. Assuming the party is looking to score some gold rather than just score, Schwingas are a harmless nature spirit that are even good-natured. Make them actual spirits instead of elemental, since Mystara has the spirit realm. It's a bit of an investigation adventure without a lot of danger, but it's designed to teach the players about that part of adventuring. Afterwards, they want to track down the newbie McMurder machine at 2nd level or 3rd level. They're more than welcome. The 10-town sections can be flipped through with a few minor changes, like taking out races that don't exist in Mystara and replacing them with those that do. Replace the allegedly quite rare, yet surprisingly ubiquitous tieflings that you'll meet in every town, either with humans, or for bad guys, throw the party for a loop with Baldendar or Buttes that you can find in the Monster Manual of Mystara. Duergar are all over the module, and they can be replaced with Dwarven conspirators from the Repossessed faction. Essentially, they're in Norwold to strip mine what they can and use the newly acquired wealth to hire a force to overthrow Wecome. Add in various monsters and mercenaries to build up their strengths and to give some variety in their dungeons. These are smart opponents, and they will retreat if pressed. If you need one with magical powers, throw in some one-shot magic items to simulate spells. For the awakened plants and animals that the party's going to find all over the place, throw on the spirit tag, and that's easily explained. If you're playing an Ethengar Spirit Shaman, remember to thank your Dungeon Master for doing this. There's going to be kobolds. Remember, Mystara kobolds are dogs, not lizards, because you're in the frozen north, you're not going to run into lizards. If the kobolds are supposed to have wings or magical effects, go with gnome-designed winged harnesses and one-shot magic items. The 10-town sections can be converted fairly easily, with several of the towns requiring no changes at all. Or skip over all of it and just start your players at 3rd level, since those adventures seem to be nothing but starting dungeons to get you to that level anyways. After the starter quests, you've got a whole bunch more filler quests with no impact on the plot whatsoever. There's a crashed mind flayer nautiloid, run by some gnome squid-like things that seem to be out of place, even in the Forgotten Realms. They even have a laser pistol. If you want to leave this one completely out of the game, nobody will notice. The party can run across an upside-down ruin trapped in ice. It's an interesting dungeon, just change the Netheril origin to Nithian. Then you get the bonus of no one recognizing anything because, like everybody else in the world, their memory of Nithia is wiped. There are 2 rival Goliath camps, which aren't native to Mystara, so instead of Goliaths, change them to Creons. Cryons? There's no actual official pronunciation, so let's just go with Creon. These guys are a Mystaran native Arctic humanoid that I don't think has ever been used in a module. You don't have to change much. The Creons care mainly about their survival, and you can keep the 2 rival clans' plotline as the Creons fit into the story seamlessly. Okay, after 9 minutes of me talking, we're actually at the start of the plot. They could have just as easily said this module was for levels 5 to 11, skipping past everything I just talked about. I don't think anybody would have noticed. But let's get this part over with. The party has to choose between taking on a dwarven fortress or stopping a dragon that's raising the town. If they don't go after the dragon, bad things are going to happen while they're having fun killing dwarves. The dragon is, I believe, challenge rating 13, and since the party is right around level 7 or 8, the party is going to have a really rough time fighting that dragon, especially since the tactics in the book says it breathes fire, and then it flies out of spell and arrow range, recharges its breath weapon, and then goes back around for another pass. Of course, this leads to another one of my pet peeves with the 5th edition modules by, once again, having a world-threatening cataclysm and deciding the only people that can save it are first-level adventurers. Considering this module was written for the Forgotten Realms, and they have, I don't know how many god-level NPCs running around, which is kind of strange because you usually run into all of them in every 5th edition adventure set in the Forgotten Realms. But, once again, we have another world-threatening apocalypse, and the only people that seem to be able to do anything about it are first-level adventurers who just learned their sleep spell or how to swing a sword. You would think after a few years of missing summer that the 10 towns might put out a call to hire high-level adventurers, especially with all the epic-level NPCs just hanging around in bars and signing autographs. Maybe one of them would be willing or able to fight a goddess. So the Dwarven Fortress is going to be part of the Repossessed plot. The dwarves here are mining this place as fast as they can so they can get the wealth back to their leaders without King Ericol of Norwold being any the wiser. What they're doing here would severely damage relations between Alphatia and Rockholm, not to mention tip off King Everast of Rockholm to what's going on with the Repossessed faction outside of his borders. That makes the characters loose ends that need to be tied up. Replace the Quaggoth with snow apes, and the Barb Devil becomes a Mugina, the Myconid becomes a Fungoid, and other creatures get similar changes. There's a tortured Mind Flayer that can easily be turned into a tortured Brain Collector. If the party decides to go after the dragon instead, that's a straight-up fight once they track it down. Of course, the dragon is way over the level of most parties, so more than likely they're going to need to level up at first, either by grinding all the unrelated adventurers or cleaning out the Dwarven Fortress, which allows the dragon to destroy most of the surrounding towns. So you're going to end up with something along the lines of Baldur's Gate 2, where Imowen gets captured in the first few minutes, and rather than carve your way straight through to your missing companion, instead you go and solve every single problem that you can find in the city before you run out of problems to solve, and then you finally go and rescue your lifelong friend who's been sitting in a jail cell for the last 6 months getting tortured by an evil wizard, while you're running around hiring a sculptor for a temple, clearing out a circus, or helping get a gnome laid. So no, take your time. Imowen can wait. She's not going anywhere. You go and have fun. She'll be there when you finally decide to go get her. While pulling that crap is perfectly okay in Baldur's Gate 2, in this game, players are going to expect time to march on, even though they're doing all these minor quests to get higher levels. But what does stopping a dragon or cleaning out a castle filled with dwarven cultists have to do with confronting the cause of the eternal winter? Not much. But now we've killed 195 pages of this module, so we've got to be getting there because I'm running out of pages before we get to the appendices. So now you have to find the lost city that holds the key to stopping Queenie. Again, Netheril becomes Nithia, which is fine because Nithia loved flying pyramids and such, and the Empire was spread out all across the continent, and more so. You're going to run across a wizard who's part of the Arcane Brotherhood in the Rime of the Frostmaiden book, but you don't have to make them part of a conspiracy because this is part of Alphatia, and you can't throw a dead cat without hitting a wizard in Alphatia. This wizard, instead of having precise information, will instead have rumors and ideas of where the ruins came from, all of which are wrong, of course, because you aren't allowed to remember Nithia. Eventually you're going to have to come across Queenie. You're supposed to stab her to death, but that's boring. Since Halileska embody the human emotion of longing, instead you might try to pacify her somehow, to bring some relief to her. It will be difficult because you have to figure out what caused her loss. It might be an elven lover who died after centuries and she can't control her sorrow. She might have lost an heirloom. But it would be more work to have the adventure end peacefully, but it would also be much more fulfilling to have the endless winter end as you've warmed the heart of a Fey Queen who doesn't know her own strength. If you think the adventure ends with ending the eternal winter, you would be wrong, because there's 2 more chapters after you beat the main quest. And they're both dungeon crawls. You're going to come across a lost city, make this one Nithia, because that means you get to explore an ancient Egyptian city frozen in ice, and that's cool. You need to change the slot out because Mystara doesn't do outer planar creatures. Considering the cold nature of the setting, the evil elemental Hydrax would be more than perfect substitutions. Replace the weak and feeble Magan of Forgotten Realms with the pure and wholesome Mystaran Magan. In other words, let them talk. Then the party just has to kill everything until they get to the magic switch that will teleport the entire planet back in time. I'm not really sure how that works. The more I think about it, I'm not really sure how that could even possibly work. Some guy in Norwold pushes a switch and tomorrow a hen farmer wakes up and finds, instead of his calendar reading 1005 AC, it's now 750 BC. The more you think about that, the more your head's going to hurt. But enough of Rime of the Frostmaiden. It was one of the weakest modules for me in 5e. It was a bunch of unconnected adventures stapled together with no rhyme or flow between them. You do the starter quest, and suddenly a dragon attacks, but you also have a dwarven fortress to conquer. Then you get to face a trapped goddess. Then you discover there's a lost city unrelated to anything previously mentioned, just like the goddess wasn't related to the dragon, who wasn't related to the starting quests. This reads like somebody took a setting book and decided to run every adventure Hook suggested without thinking if the adventures have anything to do with each other. My advice? Cherry pick this book for the good adventures, and there are several fun ones to play early on. Just ignore the bad ones. Like those traitorous dwarves that are going to plague the party throughout this adventure, mine this module for everything you can, and discard the rest. Next week, I'm looking at some uniquely Mystaran creatures, the elemental creatures of law. While these guys were from the original Law Chaos axis, not all of the lawful creatures were nice. So until next week, remember, if you keep shooting at the cold, eventually it will get warmer.